Madam President, I come to the floor to speak about an issue we should all be concerned about: the state of veterans' health care in our VA hospitals, our VA clinics, our VA system, and around the country. I've been concerned about this for some time, working very hard on getting outpatient clinics built in Louisiana, new ones, expanded ones, in particular in Lafayette and Lake Charles. I'm a member of a bipartisan working group on VA backlog issues, and we've made substantial progress through that bipartisan group. We've also introduced legislation to deal specifically with that VA backlog crisis. And as we work on those things, unfortunately, the news out of the VA gets worse and worse, and the need for real progress on these fronts, including the community-based clinics I'm going to talk about in Louisiana and elsewhere, that need gets more and more dire. Think about the recent report. CNN and others have reported that in Arizona, at least 40 U.S. veterans died waiting for appointments at the Phoenix VA healthcare system. Many of these were placed on a secret waiting list. The secret list was part of an elaborate scheme designed by the VA managers in Phoenix, who were trying to hide the fact that 1,400 to 1,600 sick veterans were forced to wait months to see a doctor. There's an official list that's shared with officials in Washington. That official list shows that the VA has been providing timely appointments. Problem is, you don't get on that official list in some cases until you waited months and months and months on the secret list. That's hidden from Washington. That's hidden from the world. That's hidden from outsiders until the news media broke the story. So 40 of those veterans died waiting for appointments through this abuse. In Colorado, USA Today and others reported that clerks at the Department of Veterans Affairs clinic in Fort Collins were instructed last year about how to falsify appointment records. So it appeared the small staff of doctors was seeing patients within the agency's goal of 14 days. Exact same abuse, exact same type of scheme, different details. Many of the 6,300 veterans treated at the outpatient clinic waited months to be seen, but that was hidden through this scheme. If the clerical staff had allowed records to reflect that veterans waited longer than 14 days, they were punished by being placed on the bad boy list, the report shows. So again, exactly the same of fraud and abuse, the same scheme designed to hide the real waits that veterans in these places and in many other places around the country are subjected to. We see these horrible abuses. We see these examples with increasing frequency. It's gotten so bad that the head of the American Legion and the head of the Concerned Veterans of America on Monday called for Secretary Shinseki to resign, called for members of his top leadership to resign with him. The calls for his resignation came after months of reporting that I've been talking about. U.S. veterans who have actually died waiting for care at VA facilities across the country came after these reports about Phoenix, came after these reports about Colorado. Now, the heads of these organizations did not rush into a public call for his resignation. They did not take that lightly. That is virtually and perhaps completely unprecedented. But they did that on Monday. They called for the Secretary's resignation. They called for it publicly. They called for several of his leadership team to resign with him. That's how bad it's gotten. And yet in the midst of this, rather than responding to this crisis in any way we can as quickly as we can, we have important matters hung up on pure politics here on the Senate floor. And specifically, I'm talking about my proposal to move forward with 27 community-based clinics around the country, including the two vital new and expanded community-based clinics that we need to move on and approve and build in Louisiana, in Lafayette and Lake Charles. Now, these clinics around the country, and particularly the two in Louisiana, in Lafayette and Lake Charles, have been hung up through one bureaucratic screw-up after another. These should have been built by now. First, in terms of our two Louisiana clinics, the VA messed up how they let out the contract, and that caused them to pull back. It was their mistake, pure and simple. They have admitted that freely, and it cost us a year in terms of moving forward with those clinics. After that mistake was corrected, at the loss of a year of waiting, then the CBO decided that they were going to score these clinics in a completely new way, something they had never done before, and that caused a quote-unquote scoring or fiscal issue with regard to all 27 of the VA community-based clinics that I'm talking about around the country. That further delayed progress. Finally, after these two major delays, leaders in the House got together on a bipartisan basis, and I want to commend my Louisiana colleagues in the House in particular, led by Congressman Boustany and others, to fix this scoring issue. They put together a reform bill. They got it approved by the House overwhelmingly, one dissenting vote. You know, resolutions to honor Mother Teresa don't pass the U.S. House of Representatives these days with only one dissenting vote, but they did that. It came over here. I worked to address some small issues and objections that existed on the Senate side through a perfecting amendment, which I have at the desk. I worked very hard for weeks to clear up those objections so we could move forward with this non-controversial measure. Because of that, we have unanimous support of the United States Senate. Not one single objection to moving forward with these 27 community-based VA clinics around the country. Not one single objection related to the substance of that proposal. Not one. The only objection now has been from the distinguished senator from Vermont, who objects to moving forward with this focused proposal because the Senate does not agree unanimously or near unanimously with his much larger bill that encompasses dozens of VA issues. Now, again, I have pledged and will work with the senator on those broader issues. I've been working hard on those issues, including these clinics, including being an active member of the bipartisan working group on the VA backlog issue. I'll continue to work on that. But the fact remains that his larger bill has substantial opposition. Around 46 senators, around 44 senators opposed to that larger bill. In the meantime, I think we should agree on what we can agree on. We should make progress on what we can make progress on, starting with these 27 clinics. Veterans have been dying around the country because of these ridiculous waits and the fraud and abuse involved in hiding these waits. These 27 community-based clinics will directly help address veterans who are waiting for months and months, in some cases, waiting for medical treatment. It will directly alleviate that issue in the communities where these clinics will be located. 18 states, a significant number of communities, a significant number of states. So let's agree on what we can agree on. Let's make that significant progress. Let's keep talking and working on the rest. Now, last November, Senator Sanders seemed to agree with that principle and that way of moving forward, talking about another Veterans Affairs piece of legislation. He said on November 19th of last year, quote, "I'm happy to tell you that I think that was a concern of his," talking about another of our colleagues. "We got that UC'd last night, unanimous consent. So we moved that pretty quickly. And I want to try to do those things where we have agreement. Let's move it." Quote, "I want to try to do those things where we have agreement. Let's move it." Close quote. That's all I'm asking for. We're not going to agree on everything immediately, but we can agree on important things right today, right this hour, right this minute. We do agree on 27 important community-based clinics in 18 states around the country, including 2 in Louisiana, Lafayette and Lake Charles, Louisiana, that Senator Landrieu and I represent. So I want to try to do those things where we have agreement. Let's move it. And that can start right this minute in a productive, positive way with these 27 community-based clinics around the country. So let's agree on what we can agree on. Let's move on this important clinic issue. Leaders of national groups, American Legion, American Vets, DAV, Paralyzed Veterans of America, others, think the same thing. That's why they wrote a letter June 10th of last year, June 10th of 2013, saying these community-based clinics are important. Let's come together, work together, and move specifically on these community-based clinics. They're important. And, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to submit this letter for the record.
Without objection.
So they agree with what Senator Sanders said last year. They agree with what I'm saying today. Let's come together and move on those things we can agree on. And they specifically wrote the Senate leadership about these community-based clinics. And so, Madam President, that leads to my unanimous consent, which is to adopt this spirit of agreeing where we agree, getting things accomplished whenever, wherever we can, and continuing to work on the rest. And so I ask unanimous consent that the Veterans Affairs Committee be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 3521, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, that my amendment, which is at the desk, be agreed to, that the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, let me touch on a few points with my distinguished colleague from Louisiana. First of all, regarding the allegations against the VA in Phoenix. As you know, these are very, very serious allegations. And it is absolutely appropriate that the Inspector General do a thorough and independent investigation of those allegations. As I'm sure my colleague from Louisiana knows, the leadership at Phoenix has rejected those allegations, say they're not true. The Secretary of VA has done what I believe, and I would hope my friend from Louisiana believes is the right thing to do, and that is do an independent investigation. I'm not a lawyer, but I did learn enough in school to know that you don't find somebody guilty without assessing the evidence. And frankly, just because CNN says something doesn't always make it the case. So what we need is a serious, independent investigation in the very serious allegations about Phoenix and any other facility within the VA. And what I have said is that I will hold hearings immediately, more than one hearing, if necessary, to get to the truth of the matter regarding the VA situation in Phoenix. What I would also tell my friend is when we talk about the VA, or we talk about health care in general, I'm sure that he would agree with me that as a nation we have a whole lot of serious problems, don't we? We have about 30 million people today who have no health insurance at all. Harvard University estimated about 45,000 people die each year because they don't get to a doctor when they should, because we're the only country in the industrialized world that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. There was a study that came out recently that indicates that some 200 to 400,000 patients a year, Madam President, die in hospitals in America because of medical errors in ways that could have been prevented. 200 to 400,000, that's 1,000 people a day. So yes, as chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee, I'm going to do everything that we can do with my colleagues in a bipartisan way to make sure that the veterans of this country get all of the health care they need and get it in with the best quality that they can. It is a very serious issue. Independent investigation taking place in Phoenix now. We're going to get to the truth of that. As I'm sure my colleague, when we talk about the VA, as I'm sure my colleague from Louisiana knows, that in fiscal year 2013, the VA provided 89.7 million outpatient visits, that the VA has 236,000 health care appointments every single day. Today, over 200,000 veterans in 151 medical centers, in 900 community-based outreach clinics all over this country are walking into the VA to get health care. And I will assure my colleague from Louisiana that every single day there are problems within the VA. When you have over 200,000 people walking in, there are going to be problems. But I will also assure my friend that there are problems in every other medical facility in America today as well. And I just mentioned the very frightening situation that, according to a very significant study, we are losing between $200,000 and $400,000 from preventable deaths because of hospital errors all over America. So my point about saying that is to say, let's put the VA within a broader context. You want to criticize the VA? Fine. I'm there with you. You got problems? I will work with you. But let's not paint a broad brush. The VA has 151 medical centers, has 300,000 plus employees, many of them veterans themselves. And in my view, and in the view of the veterans community, the Veterans Association, VA, Veterans Administration is providing high-quality care to the veterans across this country. It's not just me. My colleague from Louisiana may have recently read that an independent customer service survey done by the America Customer Satisfaction Index. These are people who assess how people feel about medical facilities around the country. And they found that in 2013, overall satisfaction rating for the VA was 84% for inpatient care and 82% for outpatient care, which in some respects was higher than the hospital industry in general. For the past 10 years, the American Consumer Satisfaction Index has found a high degree of loyalty to VA among veterans of over 90%, and I would suspect that my colleague from Louisiana, when he talks to veterans in Louisiana, and he says to them, as I'm sure he does, what do you think about VA health care? Well, I can tell you that in Vermont, what veterans say, you know what, it's pretty good health care. Is it perfect? No. Are there problems? Yes. In general, they think it is pretty good health care.
The senator will state his inquiry.
I have a pending unanimous consent request, and I'd like to inquire how I proceed to have a ruling on that and hopefully have it passed through the Senate.
Is there objection to the request from the Senator from Louisiana?
Is there objection to the request from the senator from Louisiana?
Well, what I'm going to do, Madam Chair, is I am going to object, and I'm going to ask for a unanimous consent on legislation that I have offered. I want to say a word about that. And I want to ask my friend from Louisiana, my colleague from Louisiana, has indicated that he wants to work with us. I think I heard that in his statement today, and I applaud that. I'm not quite sure that he has done that yet, but I look forward to him and his staff And I would invite my colleague from Louisiana to come to my office at a mutually convenient time to see how, in fact, we can work together. Will my colleague from Louisiana take me up on that offer? I would ask my colleague.
Reclaiming my time, reclaiming the floor since my unanimous consent is...
No, I asked, Madam Chair, I just asked a brief question from my friend from Louisiana.
Madam President, a point of parliamentary inquiry. I had a...
The senator will state his parliamentary inquiry.
My inquiry is this. I had a unanimous consent request. It has been objected to. May I reclaim the floor and reclaim my time? And in doing so, I'll be happy to respond to the senator.
Okay.
The request has not yet formally been objected to.
Okay, well, I would again ask unanimous consent that the Veterans Affairs Committee be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 3521 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, that my amendment, which is at the desk, be agreed to, that the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
I do object, and I'm going to ask in a few moments.
Objection is heard.
Madam President, if I may reclaim the floor and reclaim my time, I'd like to respond to that. I think that's really unfortunate. As we've all agreed to today and in previous appearances on the floor, there is absolutely no objection on the merits of this proposal. The only objection from the distinguished senator from Vermont is that a far larger bill, which does have significant opposition, around 44 members, roughly almost half of the Senate, people have concerns about that. So if he can't play the game exactly his way, he's going to take his ball and go home, and he's going to block 27 community-based clinics on which there is no substantive objection, on which the leaders of national veterans organizations have pleaded with leaders of the Senate and House to act on in a bipartisan way. I'm particularly concerned that today what I hear is an even higher bar that we're going to have to meet to act on these clinics that are not objected to on their merits. Previously, the senator from Vermont talked about his far broader bill. Today, he talked about all of health care. Apparently, I'm going to have to agree with Senator Sanders about all of health care reform before we can move forward on these 27 community-based clinics on which there is no substantive objection. The senator from Vermont said he'll do everything he can to deal with these issues. Well, we can do something right here, right now to deal with these issues. It's not solving every problem in the world. It's not solving every problem in health care. It's not solving every problem in the VA, but it's doing something real and meaningful and substantial in 27 communities in 18 states. We can move forward with these community-based clinics. We can try to do those things where we have agreement. Let's move it. We can do that, and that's all I'm asking. And I think it's really counterproductive to take this view that until we agree about all of the VA or about all of health care or whatever, we're not going to do any of that. I think that's really sad and counterproductive. I'll keep coming to the floor. I'll keep working on this vital issue. I'll keep working on other vital issues. I'll keep talking to the senator from Vermont about his broader bill. But I have to say, these scandals in Phoenix and elsewhere don't alleviate my concerns. They only heighten my concerns about a broader bill that's going to push many more patients overnight into a system that is obviously broken. And so I'll continue talking and working about all of that. I'll continue working on the bipartisan working group on the VA backlog. But let's do what we can do now. Let's start with one step, and then two, and then five, and then maybe we can start to jog, and then we can start to run. I think that's the productive path forward, and I would urge my colleague to reconsider and let us move forward with these important clinics.
Madam President?
The senator from Vermont.
Unfortunately, I didn't quite hear that the senator from Louisiana actually wanted to work with us. So I will have my office call his office up and see if we can sit down with our staffs and find out what the senator's concerns are about legislation. It's not Bernie Sanders' legislation. It's not the Veterans Committee's legislation. This is legislation supported by the American Legion, the Disabled American Veterans, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Vietnam Veterans of America, the Iraq, Afghanistan Veterans of America, and virtually every other veterans organizations in America. And in preparation for the discussion that I look forward to having with my colleague from Louisiana, this is not changing the world. This is not legislation that's going to solve every problem in the world. But it does do a whole lot to improve lives for millions of veterans and their families who are hurting. And I think it is appropriate that, in fact, we do that. And let me just list, and I want my colleague from Louisiana to be thinking about these issues, to come into the office and tell me, no, Senator Sanders, I disagree. Does he disagree with restoration of full COLA for military retirees? As he knows, for current people in the military, new people who are coming in, they're going to get less of a COLA than veteran long-standing members of the military. Maybe he disagrees, maybe he doesn't. Let's talk about it. Does he believe that the veterans community, people who go into the VA, should be entitled to dental care? I don't know about Louisiana, but I can tell you that in Vermont, that is a very, very serious issue all over this country. Veterans are dealing with rotting teeth. They can't get that care in VA facilities right now. There is widespread support for advanced appropriations for the VA. I think virtually all of the veterans organizations understand that the VA could do a better job if they had advanced appropriations. I support it. Many people support it. I don't know if my colleague from Louisiana supports it or not. Let's work together. I'll find out. And the next time we come down to the floor and we go through this exercise, we can tell the people what we agree with and what we don't agree with, ending the benefits backlog. The truth is that the current VA administration, General Shinseki and others, inherited a paper system. Can you believe that? The year 2009, the VA benefits system was on paper, maybe the last remaining system of its size in the world to still be on paper and not digital. Well, what people at the VA have done, General Hickey and others, is they transformed that system from paper to electronic records. And guess what? The backlog is going down. But that's not good enough for me. We have language in this bill which will make sure that that backlog continues to go down. There's an issue that I'm sure my colleague from Louisiana is very familiar with. That is in-state tuition. There are veterans from Louisiana who may want to go to school in Vermont, or veterans from Vermont may want to go to school in Louisiana, but they can't get in-state tuition. Serious problem. We address it. What does my colleague from Louisiana feel about that issue? Extending health care access for recently separated veterans. As he knows, we have legislation now which extends free health care for all those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan for 5 years. I think it should be extended for 10 years. Does he agree? Does he not agree? Veterans community feels very strongly about that issue. We have high unemployment rates for returning veterans. We want to do something to expand employment opportunities. We have the issue of sexual assault, very serious issue, as we all know. And we want to make sure that the VA is providing excellent quality care to those victims of sexual assault. We have, to my mind, a really tragic problem, Madam President, and that is, the good news is that a few years ago, Congress did the right thing, and they said to the post-9/11 veterans, those men and women who came home seriously injured, that we're going to pass a Caregivers Act to give support to your wives or your sisters or your brothers who are providing often 24/7 care for you every single day, long hours, great stress. And we said we're going to help you. But what we didn't do is reach back to the Vietnam-era veterans, Korean War veterans, even World War II veterans. You have families today, Madam Chair, where you've got a 70-year-old woman who has taken care of a husband who lost his legs in Vietnam, day after day, year after year, is getting virtually no support from the government. This legislation, with the strong support of the Paralyzed Veterans of America, many other organizations, says we can't ignore those people. I don't know what my friend from Louisiana feels about this. Let's talk about it. So here's the bottom line. The bottom line is, as I have said many times, I do support the provision that the senator from Louisiana speaks about. We do need these facilities, but we need a lot more. And we need cooperation, people coming together. The senator from Louisiana said that there were, I believe, 44 people who voted in opposition. He's right. Forgot to mention there were 56 who voted for this bill with the support of every veterans organization in America, and one person was absent who would have voted for it. 57 voted for it. 44 voted against it. Unfortunately, in the rules of the Senate, when you have a Republican filibuster, we do need 60 votes. I am looking for 3 more Republican votes. One of those votes that I would very much appreciate receiving is from the senator from Louisiana. That would make me 2 votes shy, and we think we're making some progress with some other Republicans who understand that we must address the serious needs facing the veterans community. So I again extend my request to the senator from Louisiana to work with me, but pending that, Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to calendar number 297, S-1950, with the Sanders Amendment, which is at the desk and is the text of S-1982, the Comprehensive Veterans Health and Benefits and Military Retirement Pay Restoration Act.
Is there objection?
Madam President,
The senator from Louisiana.
Madam President, I object on behalf of myself and 43 other senators.
Objection is heard.
Not because of any other reason, because of substantive concerns with the bill.
All right.
Objection is heard.
Madam President, I hear what my colleague from Louisiana says. I hear that he objects to passing legislation which has the support of virtually every veterans organization in the country that represents many, many millions of veterans. I hear him objecting to legislation which has the support of 57 members of the United States Senate. And I hear him objecting to what I believe is legislation that has the support of the vast majority of the American people who do believe we should do right by our veterans. Very easy to send people off to war, a lot harder to take care of them when they come home. So, Madam President, what I would simply say is I look forward to sitting down with my colleague from Louisiana and other Republican colleagues, and we're doing that right now, but specifically with my colleague from Louisiana, Senator Vitter, and see where we can agree and how we can create some significant legislation to address the very serious problems facing the veterans community.
Madam President?
The senator from Louisiana.
Madam President, just to briefly repeat, I did object on behalf of myself and 43 other senators about major provisions in this bill. I think that's happy to talk about it, happy to work on it, happy to work with Senator Burr, who is the ranking member on the committee, who has been communicating all these concerns to Senator Sanders and his staff. But I think that's very different than objecting to a focused community-based clinic bill that has no objection on the merits. I just think it's a shame not to try to do those things where we have agreement, let's move forward, not to move forward. That would be moving forward in a substantial way. That would improve the lives quickly of veterans in 27 communities, 18 states, including Lafayette and Lake Charles, communities that certainly Senator Landrieu and I very, very much care about, very much want to have their VA issues addressed in this way. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President, I would
Senator from Vermont.
simply reiterate my hope that Senator Vitter would sit down with me, his staff would sit down with my staff, and we can work out our differences. I have always been willing to compromise, make changes in the legislation, but the veterans of this country who have put so much, have suffered so much, have been hurt so much, we owe them so much that we have got to do right by them. So with that, Madam President, I would